I never thought a Tuesday afternoon would be the day my heart finally gave out. Not metaphorically. Not the kind of heartbreak you feel when someone you love pulls away, but the kind where your vision tunnels, your knees buckle in the middle of a damn supermarket, and your world fades to black while strangers gasp around you. 1 minute, I was reaching for a bottle of ibuprofen, and the next, I was waking up in a sterile hospital room with wires stuck in my chest, a nurse checking my vitals, and the taste of copper in my mouth that told me death had leaned in close but hadn't kissed me just yet. I remember trying to speak, but all I could manage was a whisper, and in that moment, the only person I wanted to see, the one face I prayed would be there holding my hand, was my wife's. 21 years of marriage, 2 decades of building a life, a home, and memories, and yet that hospital door stayed closed longer than it should have. She came on the second day, hair curled, makeup done, wearing that perfume I bought her on our anniversary in Charleston, the one she used to wear just for me. But somehow that day, it smelled like a stranger had gifted it to her instead. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her voice was soft, careful, like she was walking through a minefield she had personally laid. She didn't ask how I was feeling. Not really. She asked about my insurance, about the doctors, about how long I'd be there. And when I reached for her hand, she flinched, just barely, but enough for a man who knows every breath she's ever taken to notice. I wanted to believe it was stress, or fear, or maybe she was just overwhelmed. But deep down, something ancient inside me, something primal, knew that the woman standing by my bed wasn't there out of love. She was there out of obligation. She was already gone. They kept me another 10 days. During that time, she came 3 more times, always around 5 p.m., always dressed like she was going somewhere afterward, and never once stayed longer than 15 minutes. I started noticing things. Her phone never left her hand. She never made eye contact for longer than a second, and when I asked about the house, the bills, or even our dog, she'd deflect or say, "Don't worry, I'm handling everything." But that was the problem. She was handling everything without me. There's a kind of loneliness you feel when your body is failing, but there's a whole different level of hell when the person who swore they'd love you in sickness and in health treats your survival like a mild inconvenience. And while my body slowly healed, something colder and much harder was being born in my chest. Not resentment, not rage, just the slow, bitter realization that I had been dying long before my heart ever stopped beating. When the nurse finally wheeled me out into the sunlight, 10 full days after my heart had tried to kill me, I felt like a ghost being released from purgatory. Only this time, I was going back to a home that no longer felt like mine. The driveway was empty, which struck me as odd, because I had called my wife an hour earlier to let her know I was coming, and she had mumbled something about errands, sounding more distracted than concerned. As I stepped through the front door, the air felt vacant. Not just quiet, not just still, but vacant, like the walls themselves had stopped remembering us, like the house had already started forgetting I ever lived there. The photos on the stairwell were missing, gone, and the living room had been rearranged, as if she were trying to erase the grooves our lives had carved into the furniture. And there, on the dining room table, not even an inch from the spot where we'd once eaten our first Thanksgiving turkey as husband and wife, sat a stack of manila folders that turned my stomach to ice. I stared at them for what felt like an eternity, like they might sprout claws and drag me under. When I finally opened the folder, my hands trembling worse than they ever did on the cardiac floor, I saw exactly what I feared but hadn't dared name aloud. Divorce papers already signed by her, the ink still wet enough to smudge when my thumb brushed across her name. There was no note, no explanation, no apology, not even a post-it on the fridge saying, "We need to talk," which, in hindsight, might have almost felt like mercy. I stood there, breathing unevenly, reading through the cold legal jargon, and realized she had already made copies, already filed them, already decided that my near death was more of a convenient window than a terrifying event. And just like that, the woman who held my hand during chemotherapy 5 years ago, the same one who once cried when I forgot our anniversary, had left me without so much as a backward glance, like I was a burden she'd been waiting for the universe to remove. But what struck me the hardest, what crawled up my spine and nested in the back of my skull like a colony of hornets, was the way it all felt rehearsed. This wasn't an emotional decision made in panic. This was a plan. She had waited for the moment I was weakest, most vulnerable, most dependent, and she didn't just walk out, she vanished. Clothes gone. Closet emptied. Bathroom cabinet wiped clean. Even her damn coffee mug, the one that said wifey in chipped gold lettering, was missing from its hook beside mine. And that's when the chill turned into fire. Because love doesn't end like that. Not even bad love. That kind of disappearance doesn't happen unless someone is waiting for her on the other side. And in that moment, heart still fragile, legs barely holding me up, I knew that this wasn't just betrayal, this was strategy. She didn't leave me while I was dying. She used my death, or what she hoped was my death, as her escape hatch. And suddenly, I didn't feel broken anymore. I felt sharp. I remember just standing there, in the middle of my kitchen, holding those divorce papers like they were radioactive, my hands trembling so badly I thought I might drop them, but I didn't. Because there was something about the weight of betrayal that locks your muscles into place. The silence in the house was louder than a scream, thick and echoing in ways I'd never noticed before, like the walls themselves were mocking me for not seeing this coming. I started walking through each room slowly, methodically, like a man inspecting the scene of his own murder, and the evidence was everywhere, empty drawers, closet hangers swinging like wind chimes in a storm. And that godforsaken scent of lavender shampoo lingering in the bathroom air, mocking me like a final insult from someone who hadn't even had the decency to lie to my face. That house used to feel warm, cluttered with the ghosts of laughter and candlelit dinners and the scent of her cooking on lazy Sunday afternoons, but now it felt sterilized, gutted. Like someone had come through with a scalpel and removed every trace of our life together with surgical precision. But it wasn't just what was missing that unsettled me, it was what she had left behind. The framed photos had all disappeared from the walls, sure, but in the drawer of her nightstand, beneath a forgotten hairbrush and a melted chapstick, I found an old burner phone, the kind of cheap, prepaid thing you buy when you don't want someone to know who you've been calling. I stared at it like it might bite me. My heart, already beaten half to death, started pounding again as I flipped it open, my thumb hovering over the power button like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. And when the screen lit up, low battery, one new message, I swear to God, time paused. It was a simple text. No name, just a number. He's home early. Can't talk. We'll explain later. I stared at that message until the words burned into the back of my eyelids. There it was. The confirmation. Cold. Casual. Calculated. She didn't just leave me. She had someone else. And they had a timeline. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. What I did was walk out onto the porch, sit down in the chair she used to read in every morning, and let the evening roll in like smoke. The birds were still chirping. The wind still moved the trees. The world, oblivious to the implosion of my marriage, kept spinning like nothing had happened. But inside me, something had shifted. Not broken. Shifted. Because if this woman, this person I gave every piece of myself to, had used my near-death as a window to escape into someone else's arms, then I wasn't going to play the role of the sobbing fool in her little act. No. This wasn't going to be a tragedy. This was going to be a reckoning. And if she thought I was just going to roll over and give her the house, the life, and the quiet, clean exit she clearly wanted, then she had forgotten who built every single damn brick of it to begin with. People always say hindsight is 20/20, but let me tell you something they never warn you about. Once you finally see clearly, that clarity doesn't bring peace. It brings rage. It brings shame. It brings a flood of moments you dismissed, repressed, or excused, all crashing back through your skull like a dam breaking under the weight of your own denial. After I found that burner phone and sat there reading that smug little text message, my brain opened the floodgates to every single red flag I'd ignored over the last 3 years. Like the way she suddenly started working late twice a week, always on Tuesdays and Thursdays, claiming the accounting firm was doing a big audit push, and how every time I offered to bring her dinner, she'd decline with a practiced smile and a quick, "Don't bother. I already ate." Or the fact that she used to leave her phone on the kitchen counter while we watched TV. But somewhere along the way, it started following her everywhere. To the bathroom, to the laundry room, even under her pillow at night, like a second heartbeat she couldn't be separated from. I remembered the time I came home early from work because the power at the office had gone out, and when I walked through the front door, she nearly jumped out of her skin, her laptop slammed shut, her face pale, her voice too chipper, like she was performing happiness instead of living it. "Just working on taxes," she had said. But I saw the way she hovered over that screen like a dragon guarding treasure. Or the weekend we went away to Asheville. Our anniversary, no less, and she spent more time texting than talking to me, claiming our daughter had car trouble back at home, even though when I called the girl myself, she said everything was fine. But I let it go. I always let it go. Because I believed in us, because I remembered the woman I married, the one who used to fall asleep on my chest, the one who laughed at my bad jokes, the one who used to trace my fingers with hers like she was memorizing them. I held on to that version of her even while she let go of me, one careful lie at a time. And now, sitting in the ashes of the life I thought we had, it was all so painfully, humiliatingly obvious. She hadn't just fallen out of love with me. She had rehearsed it. She had prepped for my exit like it was a stage play. She didn't drift. She planned. She crafted an exit strategy with the precision of a surgeon, quietly siphoning pieces of our marriage into a separate reality where I didn't exist. And I, the loyal husband, the provider, the man who once worked 60-hour weeks to put her through grad school, was nothing more than the dull background noise of a life she had already outgrown. But here's the thing about betrayal. Once it cuts deep enough, once it severs the part of you that still cares, you're left with something sharper than pain, clarity. And in that clarity, I stopped feeling sorry for myself. I stopped being the victim, because while she had been planning her escape, she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated the man she walked away from. I didn't sleep that night. Not really, and even when I closed my eyes, all I could see was her face. Not the version I used to hold at night, the one etched with laughter lines and warm glances, but a colder version, sharper, distant, and lit up by the glow of a screen she'd tilt away from me when she thought I wasn't looking. Around 3 a.m, I got up, poured myself a whiskey I didn't touch, and stared at the burner phone again like it might spit out a confession if I glared hard enough. I scrolled through what little was left on it. Mostly deleted messages, empty call logs, and a contact list that only had a few saved numbers. One stood out. A man named Evan G. No last name, no photo, just a single thread of messages that started with, "Tell him we're over," and ended with, "Soon." I copied the number down, took a screenshot for evidence, and right then and there, I knew I wasn't going to rest until I knew exactly who this Evan G. was, what he meant to her, and just how deep her deception had run. The next morning, I drove straight to the Verizon store, trying to look like a man in control instead of the shaking, rage-stitched wreck I really was. I asked the kid behind the counter if I could pull up the call records from our joint plan, told him I lost my own phone, forgot my password, whatever excuse I had to give to get that data. Took him a few minutes, but eventually, he handed me a printed call log that might as well have been a list of stabs to the chest. Dozens, no, hundreds of calls and texts to that same number. Morning, night, during work, during vacations, even during my damn hospital stay. The dates lined up too perfectly, like pins on a murder board. Each one a moment where she was somewhere else, telling me she loved me while whispering sweet nothings to someone named Evan G. And then, just to twist the knife, I saw another number pop up. One I recognized as belonging to my old friend Marcus. A guy I once invited to Thanksgiving dinner. A man who sat across from me, smiled at my wife, and toasted to lifelong love. Turns out they'd been texting each other too. That was the moment the floor fell out from under me completely. This wasn't just betrayal. This wasn't just a fling. This was a network. My wife wasn't cheating. She was managing a full-blown double life with cover stories, backups, and contingency plans for when things blew up, because clearly, she knew they would eventually. I remember walking back to my car, clutching those call logs so tightly they crumpled in my fist, and thinking to myself, she wanted me dead. Maybe not in a physical sense, but emotionally, financially, spiritually. She wanted me out of the picture so she could move on clean, with her new life and her shiny new Evan. But she'd made one fatal error. She had left me alive. And now that I had nothing left to lose, I was going to find out everything. And when I did, God help her, I wouldn't just leave. I'd make sure she remembered what it felt like to be left behind. It's strange how quickly grief turns into calculation. How a man can go from gut-punched and hollow to deadly quiet, all in the space of a day. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was sharpened, refined by betrayal into something colder, something heavier. That morning, I stood in the mirror brushing my teeth like nothing had happened. Like my wife hadn't gutted our life with a scalpel and stitched herself into someone else's bed. But in my head, the wheels were turning with a rhythm I hadn't felt in years. Not since I was younger, building my company brick by brick, outmaneuvering men who thought I was too soft-spoken to play in their league. I'd survived boardroom battles, stock crashes, and a heart attack that damn near killed me. And now I was going to survive her. Not just survive, I was going to win. The first thing I did was call my lawyer. Not the one we used for joint taxes, but my guy. The one I'd used for real estate deals. The one who knew how to hide a storm beneath calm waters. I told him I needed to review my will and any assets tied to the house. He asked if something was wrong, and I laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because I had just realized the greatest irony of all. A few months before my heart attack, I had started the process of restructuring my estate, just in case something happened to me. The lawyer had filed the paperwork, shifted the title of the house into an LLC, and had it quietly listed under a trust tied to my sister's name, to avoid probate nightmares. My wife, in all her cruel wisdom, had left me right before the ink on the deal had dried, which meant she didn't know. She had no legal claim to the house. None. Zero. And that, my friends, was the first moment I truly smiled since I left the hospital. But I didn't stop there. I wasn't interested in simply blocking her. I wanted her to feel it, to feel the unraveling the way I had when I walked through that hollow house and smelled her perfume lingering like a curse. So I started pulling threads. I called the CPA, checked our joint accounts, quietly opened new ones under my name only. I stopped the automatic deposits, redirected my retirement fund, canceled the cards she still thought were active. I didn't say a word. I let her keep playing her role, thinking she had the upper hand, that I was some broken man licking his wounds while she played house with her flavor of the month. But I wasn't broken. I was building, planning. I was the storm she never saw coming, and when I was done, all she'd have left was the wreckage of what she thought she stole. You know, there's a strange kind of peace that settles in when you realize you've been pushed as far as you can go, and yet you're still standing, not just breathing but calculating, controlled, and dangerous in a way that only a man who has lost everything can truly be. I stopped mourning her somewhere between closing the final joint account and drafting the letter to her attorney. I wasn't acting out of bitterness anymore. No, bitterness was petty, this was precision. She thought I was still licking my wounds in that empty house. Maybe even crying into my whiskey, while she played house with Evan and posted filtered photos of her new life on social media. Not realizing I was watching it all unfold through a burner profile. The captions were vague, filled with inspirational nonsense like, "Sometimes letting go is the beginning of freedom." And I'll admit, part of me laughed. Because freedom was coming, alright? Just not the way she imagined. I waited until every move was locked into place. Every account rerouted, every legal thread double-checked, every digital footprint secured. Then I called her. I hadn't spoken to her since the hospital. She picked up on the second ring. I could hear music in the background, laughter, maybe Evan's voice, who knows. "Hey," she said, like nothing had happened. Like I was just some old chapter she hadn't bothered to finish reading. "We really need to talk about the papers. My lawyer..." I cut her off. Calm, steady, as cold. "You'll be hearing from my lawyer tomorrow," I said. "There are a few updates you'll want to be aware of before you get too comfortable playing house in someone else's bed." Her voice cracked just a little. Not much, but enough for me to hear that tiny seed of uncertainty bury itself deep inside her. And that's when I knew I had her. Not legally, not emotionally, psychologically. I didn't need revenge that came with fists or flames. I just needed her to feel what I had: powerlessness, confusion, the unbearable weight of someone rewriting the rules while you're left out in the cold. The next day, her attorney called mine in a panic. Turns out she'd been operating under the illusion that the house, my house, was community property. But as the documents made clear, the home had been removed from joint ownership months ago. She had no claim. Not one legal inch of it. I watched the silence from her side stretch out over 2 days, no texts, no calls, not even a sarcastic quote on her social feed, just digital emptiness. And then, like clockwork, came the email, cold, professional, stripped of all the charm she used to get her way. She asked for a meeting. She said she was willing to negotiate amicably. That's when I really smiled. Not because she wanted peace, but because she realized the war was already over and she'd lost it before she even knew it had begun. There's something oddly poetic about watching the same person who tried to destroy you start to drown in the very fantasy they abandoned you for. I didn't need to lift a finger. I didn't have to yell, threaten, or even speak her name aloud. Life, or maybe karma, depending on how spiritual you are, started handling the cleanup. See, when she walked out that door, she thought she was upgrading. She believed Evan G., with his smooth talk, leather watch, and barely concealed midlife crisis, was going to be her ticket to a better version of the life I built. The fairy tales don't last long when they're written on top of lies. Within 2 weeks of the legal blow, Evan pulled out of their little love nest arrangement. My guess? He wasn't thrilled to learn she'd lost access to the house, the money, and the clean image she sold him. Men like him don't invest in messes, and suddenly she was exactly that. A very expensive, very public, very inconvenient mess. I watched it all unravel from a distance, never intervening, just quietly observing as her curated little Instagram world turned hollow. The smiling selfie stopped. The inspirational quotes dried up. The new beginnings captions turned into cryptic song lyrics and silent stories of wine glasses at noon. Her friends, the ones who used to comment with heart emojis and "so proud of you, girl," slowly disappeared, too. Turns out it's easy to find cheerleaders when you're winning. Not so much when you've been evicted from your illusion. She moved into a small apartment across town. Not the trendy, boho chic kind, but the beige, soulless kind with the flickering hallway light and paper-thin walls. And I know this not because I followed her, but because her name showed up on a rental application my friend in property management flagged, thinking I'd want to know. I smiled, thanked him, and told him not to worry. I wasn't seeking vengeance anymore. I already had everything I needed. She sent me an email last week. Short, cold, desperate in the way only prideful people can be when their backs hit the wall. She said she was open to revisiting settlement discussions. Said she wanted a fresh start without animosity. I didn't respond. Not because I didn't know what to say, trust me, the words were there, sharp and ready, but because silence is the most devastating answer you can ever give someone who once believed they held power over you. I simply archived the message, turned off my phone, and sat outside with a drink in hand, watching the sun bleed into the lake behind my cabin. Funny how peace tastes sweeter when it follows destruction. And hers was just beginning. There's a strange kind of silence that settles in once the war is over, not the silence of defeat or even the stillness that follows a storm, but something deeper, almost sacred, like walking through a forest after a fire and realizing the air smells cleaner. That was what healing felt like for me, not sudden, not cinematic, just slow and quietly victorious. In the beginning, I didn't know what to do with my freedom. I was so used to living under the weight of someone else's expectations, walking on eggshells she had carefully arranged around every room, that when it all cracked and fell away, I found myself staring at the empty spaces with both relief and grief tangled together in my chest. But slowly I began to rebuild. Not in the way people think. I didn't run out and buy a sports car or dye my hair some ridiculous shade to feel young again. No. I rebuilt like a man who had nothing left to prove. Quietly. Deliberately. On my terms. I started with small things. I got a dog, a rescue mutt with too much energy and one ear that stuck straight up like it was constantly asking a question. I named him Jasper. Every morning we walked along the lake behind my new place, just the two of us, the air cold and clean and biting in a way that reminded me I was still alive. I picked up woodworking again, a hobby I abandoned when life got too loud. I'd spend hours carving and sanding in the garage, letting the hum of the tools drown out the memories she left behind. And for the first time in years, I ate without tension. I slept without waiting for a passive-aggressive comment to land like a knife in the dark. I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes. No more tracking her, no more questions, no more spirals. It was like I had walked out of a burning house and finally remembered how to breathe. The funny part is, people noticed. Friends I hadn't spoken to in years started calling, not out of pity, but curiosity. "You sound different," they'd say, and I'd just smile and nod. Because how do you explain to someone that being betrayed was the best thing that ever happened to you? I even ran into her once, accidentally, at the grocery store. She looked older, not in age, but in spirit. Tired. Hollow in a way that mascara and rehearsed smiles couldn't fix. She said hello, all fake warmth and awkward pauses, and I returned the greeting with polite disinterest, as if we were old classmates rather than former lovers. She looked at me like she wanted to say something more. Maybe ask a question. Maybe apologize. But I didn't give her the space. I just smiled, tipped my head, and walked away. Because the truth is, I didn't need closure from her anymore. I was the closure. And the best revenge I ever got was peace. It happened on a Thursday, the final thread severed, not with a bang, not with some grand revelation, but with a simple envelope dropped into my mailbox. Inside was a final notice from her attorney, stating she was no longer pursuing claim to marital assets. No settlement, no negotiation, no plea for reconsideration, just silence, folded neatly into paper and ink. And in that moment, standing on my porch in the golden spill of evening light, I realized something that struck me deeper than anything she ever said or did. She finally understood that she lost. Not just the house, not just the money, but the version of me that once would have chased after her with apology in my eyes and forgiveness on my tongue. That man died the day I came home from the hospital and found the life we built gutted like a crime scene. What stood in his place now was someone better. Not colder, just stronger, wiser, untouchable. The lake was calm that night, reflecting the stars like glass. I sat in the Adirondack chair I built myself, a cold beer in one hand and Jasper curled at my feet like he'd been born to guard my peace. I thought back on everything. The affair, the deception, the gutting silence that followed it all, and felt not rage, not regret, but a strange and satisfying kind of gratitude. Because without her betrayal, I never would have found this version of myself. The man who doesn't beg, doesn't chase, doesn't shatter when people walk away. I didn't just survive her. I outgrew her. That was the real revenge. Not the legal win. Not the loss she endured. It was the fact that I was no longer the man she could break. And the most painful part of it all, at least for her I imagine, is that I didn't just survive. I started to thrive without her. A few nights ago, I received one last message, short, quiet, almost pitiful in its simplicity. Are you happy? No punctuation. No greeting. Just that question. I stared at the screen for a long time, not because I didn't know the answer, but because I wanted to savor it before I responded. I typed exactly 3 words, more than ever. Then I blocked the number, stood up from the porch and walked inside my home. Not the one I shared with her, not the shell she abandoned, but the one I built from the ashes. The one filled with quiet mornings, peaceful nights, laughter that doesn't need to be faked, and a dog who never lies. The one where I'm no longer waiting for someone to love me the way I deserve. Because now, finally, I love myself enough to never settle again.